Now the next question is this. Actually, this one I've asked many times. Alright, so I'll ask someone to answer. Would Adam and Eve have sinned without Satan's influence? Part 1. Would Adam and Eve have sinned without Satan's influence? So I try to collate together with Garden of Eden stuff. Now, why did God choose to create man, knowing that man would sin? Taking into account that people would still sin and rebel against God during Christ's millennial reign. 2 parts. Number 1. Would Adam and Eve have sinned without Satan? Who wants to answer? Hannah, what do you think? Hannah. Would Adam and Eve have sinned without Satan's influence? Yes. Okay. Eugene. Means yes, sir. Okay, Alan. Don't know. Well, easy way out. Don't know. Don't know. That's why it's asked.
Actually, yes and no.
Yes and no. Well, don't know is really safe enough. Don't know, yes and no. We cover all. Definitely never wrong. Don't learn like that. Huh? Don't learn from him. Actually, the answer is don't know. Because the Bible didn't say. All we know is Eve was deceived. Would Eve have sinned? That is one thing that we do not know. But the person say, since people in the millennium will sin, right? Do you understand the reasoning? It's a very good question. Alright, because I've mentioned to you before, during the 1,000 years, Maggie, during the 1,000 years when Christ reigned on earth, the millennium period, where is Satan? Very good, in the bottomless pit. Alright, Satan is in the bottomless pit. Okay? And at this time, do people still sin? No. Do people still sin during the millennium?
Yes.
Yes, they sin. In fact, they sin so badly that when Satan is released, they are going to join Satan to fight God. They will still sin. So the person is thinking, well, if since Satan is not around to tempt man, they still sin, is it possible that in the Garden of Eden, without Satan, Eve and Adam would not have sinned? What do you think, Shane? Do you think this correlation is possible? It's possible. Is it not possible? Do you think that without Satan, just because without Satan here people sin, without Satan here people will still sin? Okay, Eugene shake his head. Why? They were perfect. They were perfect. The reason why people will sin here is because they are born of two imperfect persons. They are sinners, therefore they will sin. Alright? So, will Adam and Eve sin? Don't know. It's just simply don't know. To say that they will definitely have sinned because men do sin when Satan is not around would not be a very strong case. Okay? Do you understand? Hungry, is it? Okay, but the question still remains. Now, knowing that man will fall, why did God go ahead and create man, knowing that man will sin? Faith, why?
Maybe like the temptation and stuff is to test and to see.
Very slowly, yeah?
Well, that sounds like all the temptations is to test the faith to see if they actually like.
To test them. But God already knows they will fail the test. So why did even God create them? Why? Why do you think so? Ada, why do you think so? Why? Those who attended Adelphi has no reason to not know the answer. I will say I will ask you all to answer the question. Why? Wow, you want to rescue Ada? Yes.
Is it because God knew they would pass?
Is it because God knew that they will pass? No, God knew that they will fail. God knows the future, right? God knew that they will fail. That's why this person said, if God already knew they will fail, why did He create man? Susan, because you got the answer right in Adelphi, so I ask you, why? Don't tell me you forget. Because He is sovereign. Why did God do this? Because He is sovereign. What is sovereign, Anna? Almighty, in a sense, yes. When I say a country is sovereign, what does it mean? Okay, what does it mean, Hannah? Hazel, or H. What does it mean? Sovereign means you are independent, right? Means you answer to no one. You choose to do anything, you set the law, no one can question you. You decide. That's called sovereign. Right? Sovereign. Now, let's turn to Romans. Okay, Romans chapter 7. Oh no, chapter 9. Romans chapter 9. Romans chapter 9. So the people ask many questions about, why does God do this? Why does God do that? Why did God do this? In fact, God is not fair. In fact, God is sinful for choosing to do certain things. In fact, God cannot blame us. Right? So the people had all these questions, and to all the question, God, the fact that God does anything, oh, this sounds like God is sinful, right? God make man, and then let man fall. Isn't God sinful? And then God already knew all this, and God did all this. God is not fair. He already knew man would fall. And then after the fall, He knew man that without Him, they cannot obey Him. And yet God went ahead and do all these things. God is not righteous and God is not fair. Right? How do we know they were asking this question? Now, let us read. It said God is not fair. God is not a fair person. Then God in Romans 9, verse 9. Verse 11. For the children being not yet born, neither having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of Him that calleth. Verse 12. It was said unto her, the elder shall serve the younger. And then verse 13. Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. And then verse 14. What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? God forbid. So the people are saying this. That they were thinking this. How can the younger serve the elder? Not fair. Why does God even make this kind of decision? Number one. Number two, he said, how can God elect? It's not fair that God elect. God elect means God decide who gets saved, correct? Did God elect? Did God decide who gets saved? Then when you say, hey, if you say election is true, then God decides who gets saved. And the people were not born yet, then God just say, okay, the people are not born, they haven't done anything, I just choose because I choose. He said, God is not good. It's wrong. What is the answer that God gives? Verse 14. Shall we say, is there unrighteousness with God? God forbid. God simply says, no, there is no unrighteousness in me. You may think it's unfair. You may think it's not good. But you must know that I am God. Whatever I do will never have sin in it. Correct? So number one. So that's the answer. Now number two. Then they say, well then, there are these unbelievers. God knows that there will be unbelievers. And unbelievers cannot obey God. But yet He went ahead and created man. So this is how they say. Now look at alright, so He say, now God said, now I raised Pharaoh, right? I raised up Pharaoh, and then Pharaoh disobeyed me, and then through that I show my glory, my power. Then verse 18. Verse 18, God says, therefore hath He mercy on whom He will have mercy, and whom He will hardeneth. Whom He will, He hardeneth. So God says, who I will have mercy to and who I will not have mercy to, and I will do things and the person's heart will get harder and harder like Pharaoh. Then verse 19, thou wilt say then unto me, yeah, I know, Paul said, I know what you want to say to me. God is not fair. Now verse 19 said, I know what you will say, for who hath resisted, why doth he yet find fault, for who hath resisted his will? So he said, how can God do all these things when because of our fault we can't obey him? You know what God decides is already going to happen? I find fault with God. Then, verse 20. Nay, but, O man, who art thou that replies against God? Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, why hast thou made me thus? We have no right to ask the Creator. He is sovereign. Any of you applying for PR? Do you ask, how many points? How many points? Yes. Now must have. 95 points. Okay, 95 points. Do you every day write, why 95 points? Why not 30 points? Why 95 points? Because it's the sovereign country's rule. Do you ever think of questioning them? No. If you don't question the government here, oh man. That's why I say, oh man. It's very strong. Oh man. You know what is oh man? Is to emphasize that, oh, you are just a man. You are human. You are created. You cannot question the Creator. This is called sovereignty of God. Understand that. Until the Christians submit to sovereignty. You cannot accept this, you will be in trouble. I say again, no time already, I say again. When the Christian cannot accept the sovereignty of God, you will reach a point where you will begin to question God. Very dangerous. But I say this, the sovereignty of God cannot be studied apart from what? Grace. The sovereignty of God cannot be studied apart from teens. Alright, Nancy, the sovereignty of God cannot be studied apart from teens Q&A. What? The attributes of God. The sovereignty of God can never be studied apart from the attributes, the character of God. That is what Paul is saying. He is God. He is the Creator. There's no unrighteousness in God. What you see, what you cannot understand, and ask about all these questions, why God create man, why, when He knew they were going to fall into sin and He can't resist them. Why? He simply says, know that in God there is no unrighteousness. Why I make you memorize? God is a spirit, infinite, eternal in His, and unchangeable. God is unchangeable. And it's infinite in His, let's say together, being, wisdom, power, that we cannot be. Holiness, justice, goodness, and truth. Holiness. God will never do anything that is sinful. God is unchangeable and infinite in His holiness. God is unchangeable and infinite in His goodness. God will never do anything that is not good. In His truth, God will never do anything that is wrong. The sovereignty of God must not be studied apart from that. Simply knowing that God is that, my ways are higher than you, I do not understand. It's called submission to sovereignty. The day that citizens do not submit to the sovereignty of the nation, what will happen? Sooner or later there will be riots, uprising, unhappiness, discontent. It will happen to you. The day you cannot accept God is sovereign, but God is all this. I simply know I am old man, not old man. I am just a man. I trust in God. That's it. Alright? So God, can we answer all these things? God simply say, if for my glory, the later part, if for my glory, if to show my glory, I decided to do that. If in order to show that I'm a God that is merciful, I decided to let men fall and save some. You have a problem with that? That's the answer, It's a tough answer. But it's called sovereignty of God. Alright? Only the Reformed faith continues to teach, believe, and promote the sovereignty of God. The dispensational faith does not. Does not. Okay? Let us pray. What do we have here? Top 5 reasons why church dropouts, what church dropouts say, why they stop attending church. Now please remember 66% of, well, I take the American view, they're the most readily available results. They stop attending church at least a year after turning 18. So from